Welcome back, everybody, to Futsal News Live. It's our second one in just over 2 weeks, which is pretty awesome. Getting back in front of you guys and in front of the camera. So welcome in, welcome in. Luke is with us. He is currently mobile, so that's why you can't see him at the moment. But he is there and with us, and will be joining us later. And then we are joined, more importantly, no offense, Luke, by Tristan Tillette, who is the
MVP. Yeah, I don't know about that.
He's making it all happen, but
sure.
Tonight's all about Birmingham Futsal and the story there. So really excited for this one. We've talked quite a bit, haven't we, Tristan, through messaging, but first time really having a real legitimate back and forth conversation. So we're going to do it in front of everybody.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it for sure. You guys are amazing at what you do, and we're honored to be here.
Of course. Yeah, we couldn't wait to get this going. So first and foremost, tell us a bit about yourself and how you found futsal, and kind of introduce everybody to who you are and a little bit about your background.
That's a good question. So finding futsal, I guess stumbled upon it where having 3 kids kind of playing in the local USU soccer culture. I remember there was one day, I had 3 kids at 3 different clubs, and my wife was a director at a 4th club. So it's like, do the math. I was the Luke right now. I was daddy daycare. I was driving from this field to that field to that field to this field. And I was like, sure, there's a lot of time and money we're spending, which is fine. Parents, we'll sacrifice anything and everything for our kids, for their betterment. And I remember just having a conversation and asking our 3, I think our oldest was 12 at the time. This was 8 years ago. And then our twins were like 9 or 10. And it's like, so what you guys are doing, like, basically, like, are you having fun? And they said no. And I was like, oh, then why are we doing this? So I just started to kind of look, and I'd heard of futsal. I knew what it was. Back then it was kind of the Nike Jogo Bonito, Ronaldinho highlight commercials and things. And I'm like, that looks like soccer because it's your feet, but I come from a basketball background. My dad was a basketball coach before I was born. That was actually kind of my pedigree growing up, playing in high school, college, and beyond, and coached in college for 6 years. So as I started to kind of peel back the layers of like what the game actually was, I was like, this isn't really soccer, it's basketball with your feet. So kind of seeing like the similarities and nuances to the game that I grew up loving in terms of basketball in the gym, in the court. I saw the ability to, knowing it's super engaging for young boys and girls, knowing it's way faster, knowing they're going to get the ball more, knowing they're going to get more chances at the goal, which is usually all the things young players love about soccer if they're playing. How can we like strip all the other nonsense off of it and just give them that? So we started with like pickup games, actually about 8 years ago this time. And people just kind of asked like, hey, like, what's next? Like, can we do more? Can we do more? So we kind of added some, an academy program. We calling it that because people kind of knew what that meant in the local culture. So we started training. We started kind of forming some teams. We added adult pickup games. We added a league. We brought in guest coaches. We added little ballers, 4, 5, 6. So like over the first like 3 or 4 years, it grew from like one event of literally 16 kids from like 12 different age groups, boys and girls, in the first 3 or 4 years to like a sustainable, like 7-layer, futsal cake, so to speak. Everything from a 4-year-old up to a 7 to 8-year-old to a middle schooler to a high schooler to an adult to people that maybe want to travel a little bit more. And that's kind of what it's been probably for the last 4 or 5 years or so. So it's a full-time gig for sure.
Oh yeah, that's a thing I think is most common amongst the futsal community is people are that are in it for real. You're entrenched.
Yeah, we have to be, for sure.
I love the story that it started out with the kids, your kids, because that's kind of a similar story to me when I was playing outdoor soccer as a kid. Is at one point we needed a coach, and my dad stepped up, and he was a wrestler in high school. He didn't know the first thing about soccer, so I had to back then hit the library, not Google, and not to date myself, but he pulled up all the Dutch books on coaches training and stuff and figured it out. And it sounds like you kind of did a similar thing with futsal, which is really natural and creates that that true passion and core culture that is probably what makes you guys successful, if I had to guess.
Yeah, it was very, very organic, where, I tell, as we'll get to in a sec, I know we started Birmingham, but now wife and I transitioned to Kansas. She's a college soccer coach, so we've been there the last 6 months. So like in the transition from about a year ago, December 2023 to June when we were moving, it was like finding new coaches. The easiest thing to teach is like 3-1-4-0 pivot fixo ala. And our parents are like, well, like, how is it that easy? I was like, well, when I first started, I had no idea what any of that meant. Now, the advantage was I was a coach. I mean, I've always been a coach. It's really what I've, always done in some form or fashion. And again, I grew up the son of a coach. So I was around it, and it was just in my blood and it was always around. So that's kind of the things that I gleaned from my dad, who's still the best coach I know to this day. Things that I kind of took for granted and almost like commonsensical in terms of like designing a session and organizing a team and all of the kind of nuances of what coaching is. I kind of already had that as a foundation. And then it's easy to add the tactical side, the names and kind of what the positions are. And again, seeing the correlation from basketball to futsal and vice versa, I think is, some might say, some soccer futsal folks will probably say that's a weakness. Like in my mind, that's probably my greatest strength because I don't see it like a soccer coach. I see it like a basketball and then only a futsal coach. I've never had a shin guard on my person. I've never played 1 second of organized soccer. So I've watched tons of games from youth all the way up to, professional for years and years and years. But in terms of like being an active participant and being like an organized participant in that sport, I've never done that. Not because I didn't like it, but because I grew up in inner city New Orleans and there wasn't I'm older than you. So I will date myself. I'm almost 50. So in 1983, when I was an 8-year-old kid running around the streets of New Orleans, there was no soccer. The only football was one you held in your hand and had a helmet on your head. Like that was it. So we played the kind of traditional, basketball, baseball, football, the big three American sports. So I never really had an education of what soccer was. I found that through my kids and my wife and grew an appreciation for that. But as we got into futsal, I never really saw it as a version of soccer and never really, intended for us to start a program like to develop soccer players or help soccer players. We started it to help futsal.
That's awesome. One, it's grown so substantially for you guys as well, which I think is a great testament, and it's truly grassroots, which is equally as exciting. And I believe I saw a social media post from you guys recently. Are you up to 600 kids that are coming through the program over the course of the week?
This winter, yeah, there'll be about 600 players. So it'll be
players. Wow.
Yeah, so all the way from like our little ballers or little bolista, kind of English, Portuguese, half and half. We've got 40 of them this winter. And then we have, our academy kids that play year round where they'll play. The majority of them do play soccer and futsal both. We have about 70 of those players. Then we have another 100-ish or so that come in for winter, kind of in the off season, kind of seeing, do I like futsal for soccer? Do I like futsal for futsal? I've heard some things about it. Then every week, I know you've seen our posts about the adult games that we have where we'll have about 120 to 125 of them. And then we have a winter league every weekend where there's another 200. So from Monday to Sunday, there's over 600 people a week on the courts. On one court, that's all we have is one court that we turn this way, 2 courts, and we chop it up for little ones, 4 courts. And we're like very, very effective and efficient at finding every little nook and cranny of space to use to try to help people learn and love the game for sure.
That's cool. When you say full court, is that the 40 by 20, like what international size, or is it just more like?
No, we live in the U.S., so not many people have.
I was going to say, I was going to be really, really impressed.
The music we play is not from the U.S., but we live in the U.S., unfortunately. So it's about, it's a little longer than a conventional basketball court. So like the length isn't true, but the width is 20. So we're lucky where we've gotten, several guest coaches that have come in. I mean, from, the gentleman now from Portugal, the one who's coming, we've had Sasha Filippi, we've had Diego Barato, we've had Dusan Yokisha, we've had others where they come in and it's like they're enamored with like our ability to have like the actual width of the court, which is what most don't. Most might have a little longer basketball court, but you're not going to get that, 60 feet ish wide. So you can still kind of play and you can have, replication of the actual game. So we're lucky with that for sure.
That's awesome. When you mentioned some of the coaches that have been through, and there's also some guest coaches currently for you in the doing sessions for you guys, correct? Yep. So tell us how you got there with that as well, and how you kind of built this, for me, a destination for coaches almost as well. It feels like not just for the kids. That's so incredible, and what a great opportunity for the children in your program.
Thank you. I did when I was talking to one of our intro meetings in Kansas City, I was kind of like looking back, and it's like, well, since we started, like I've never really like reflected or gotten like nostalgic and look back. It's always like, let's look in today and look forward and go forward and go forward and go forward. And then like, this was honestly the first time I did it was about 4 or 6 weeks ago. We had our meeting and Outlook because I wanted to kind of show them like, this is kind of what we've done in the past. The market's the same, but different. You know, I mean, if it can be done in Birmingham, it can be done virtually anywhere. As long as you have good people around you and you have a facility, you know, that's kind of amicable to futsal and those kind of things. So I looked, and over the last 4 years in Birmingham, we've had 15 guest coaches come in. Everything from like Boyko Ortiz, the number 3 ranked freestyler in the world. He's been here 3 times. Not futsal, but again, like having just a different format of way to engage players and just develop their love for the ball. We've had a close friend of mine who he actually ran Barefoot Football Club and Futsal in Charlotte, Coach G, Guillermo Arribe. He's been here 3 times. Dushan and Pablo came. Sasha's been here 3 times. At one point in time, he had trained Birmingham futsal players for 32 days. His stints with the U.S. men and women, he had only worked with those players for 28 days. So at that point in time, he had worked more with kids in Birmingham than he had the national teams.
Wow.
Now, obviously, they need to have more consistency with the national team. But like for Birmingham kids and moms and dads, it's like, hey, man, like y'all are getting more than national team players are getting, you know. We've had Ivan Todorovic, who, you know, the head coach at Westcliff, trying to get college futsal going and things like that. We've had Marcello Antonelli, who wrote Soccer Powered by Futsal and played as a professional golero in Italy and Division I women's outdoor soccer coach. He's been here twice. So just looking back, it's like, you know, we've had, again, 15 in 4 years. Like every few months, we have another person coming in. Roger Augusto here now, who he's coached for 25 years professionally, coached at academy levels as well. He's coached in college. He's coached, you know, England, Luxembourg, France, Spain, etc. His probably most noted, as I mentioned to you and mentioned to some of our players, is his first stint as a first division coach, coached futsal. People might have heard of him. He's called Ricardinho. Probably the best player, if not, you know, the top player, in my opinion. I like him better, but, you know, to each their own. But it definitely comes down to kind of he and Falcao in terms of who the, you know, most notably recognized futsal player is. So it's like this gentleman 20 years ago is literally coaching like the best player in the world ever. And he has so much wisdom, and the pearls of knowledge that he's been dropping here the last, you know, 2.5 weeks or so have been amazing. And we have another Portuguese coach coming in 2 days on Thursday as well, who's coached in the sporting system for the last 6 or 7 years or so.
That's so cool. You know, you and I've gotten to speak on several occasions about the experience with sporting and in a couple of different avenues, really. And I know you guys have taken some youth there. You have some family ties there now.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your experience with the Portuguese, particularly sporting, and you know, was it easy to make those connections? How did you start those conversations? And tell us a little bit about how that all began with that really solid connection.
It's really interesting where it's like the serendipity of life, where I happen to be at a certain place at a certain time, and another gentleman happened to be like at the certain place at the certain time. And like, normally I'm not too chatty when I'm kind of in the gym. I'm kind of in there and I'm watching and learning and things like that. And daughter was on I believe it was a U.S. youth futsal trip where they had a chance to go to Lisbon. Worked out well for her, where she was a 2006, still a 2006. They kind of put her on the older team because I think they needed some players there. And they were like, is that okay? I'm like, it's futsal, man. I don't care. She can play here, there. She can play with the boys. She can play with the 12-year-olds. It doesn't matter to me. Like this is amazing. You know, we're just happy to have the experience and be here. As long as she's happy, we're happy. So she had a chance to play against U19 Sporting, U19 Benfica, U19 regional selection team, which is kind of like the way it works there is it's proper youth teams that feed into the full. So first you make like your district and then your regional, et cetera, and you kind of work your way up. And then another futsal Feijó, which is also a first division. So she played 3 first division U19s as a U17 at the time, and basically like the precursor to girls trying to make the national team. So like those are the 4 experiences. So it was amazing. Day 1 training was at Sporting in the Deportivo. Like you've seen the pictures where it's, you know, this is where Ziki, Merlim, et cetera, train day to day. They don't train in the pavilion usually unless it's Champions League that I got to see this year, which was amazing as well. I digress. Sorry. But it's overlooking kind of the Avalati neighborhood, which is where Sporting is. And it's just glass on the left side. So like you can see through the neighborhood, you can see the pavilion. That's where they train. And I'm kind of, my watching spot is always like in the back corner away. So like I'm out of the way. I'm not there to coach on the sidelines. I'm not there to like, we make a mistake, I'll fold my arms and the players can read body language because they know what mom and dad are thinking, even when we think they don't. So I'm just there to watch. And this guy next to me, like he could have been the janitor for all I know. He could have been the president. He could have been the janitor. I have no idea who he is. He's like, so like, do you like this? I was like, sir, like this is amazing. Like, this is heaven. He's like, really? Like you don't have this in the US? And there was a janitor closet literally behind me. I was like, in the US, that's where we play futsal, in there. If we're lucky, if we're lucky, we might get that. And he's like, really? He's like, is that your wife? I said, yes, sir, it is. He goes, grab her. I show you. Come here. And he took us on a tour of Jarosha, the pavilion, like walked us like down in the court and like around across the street. Turns out he was the coordinator of the first team. So like the first team manager, you have Nuno Dias, the head coach. You have Paulo Luis, assistant, et cetera, et cetera. So if you watch the games, you have the assistant staff usually wear coaching gear. Nuno wears something different. The other gentleman that's not wearing coaching gear is him. Mario is his name. So he's like the behind the scenes, like organizer of everything.
Wow.
He's like, what are you doing tomorrow? I was like, hopefully some kind of futsal. He's like, you be here at 10:30. I said, I'll be here whenever you tell me to be here. Trust me. And that was their first session back. This was 2 years ago. So Pani was still there. Eric Mandoncha was still there. Gita was the goalkeeper. This is when they made Champions League final against Palma and had the interesting VAR review. I digress again. Sorry. You can tell I'm not bitter or anything. This is their first session back after the Christmas break. This is the longest break under Nuno Dias they had like ever had. So they came in, they were super happy. It was Mario, our daughter Arin, and then myself. They give him a big hug. They shake her hand and introduce themselves to her. Every player, they shake my hand and introduce themselves to me, like every player. And I'm like, correct. I was like looking around. He's like, is everything okay? I was like, that was different, man. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, in the US, like maybe one or two would introduce themselves, like professional athlete, like of that level, where like all of them are national team players. All of them are, perennial professionals. Amazing. He's like, well, like here in our culture, like when you're with us, like you're one of us. And like they spent like Ziki, he was out with an injury. So he spent 15 minutes passing and juggling with our daughter. Eric Mendonça spent 10 minutes talking to her about, does she want to play futsal? Because he had spent some time in the US. So he kind of knew the different culture. He actually used the word infrastructure in English. So Arin looked at me. She's like, I don't even say the word infrastructure. Like, who is this guy? Like, who knows everything? Like, hey man, like they know the culture. So just that was like the first day where I noticed like the main difference between kind of that culture and coaches and just teams and players there. And like kind of what we're used to here is the Portuguese people, probably not all of them, but at least the ones that I've come in contact with, from that day, even to today, are very, collaborative and cooperative. It's like, we can do way more together than we can alone, even to the point of like Sporting and Benfica is obviously a bitter, hated rival. But when we did take the players that you mentioned there last spring, we took 10. One of the first events we got to see, we saw a men's first team game on the road about 30 minutes outside. But then that Sunday, it was the U19 derby. So it was Sporting Benfica in Jarosha. So basically like a youth futsal game, but for lack of a better term, like a youth club soccer game. There was 2,500 people, ultra fans behind each goal. That doesn't happen here. So I'm just like sitting there like, this is like amazing. Sporting won. And at the end, like, the first thing the Sporting players did, they hugged and celebrated, but like they went to the Benfica fans and like clapped to like show appreciation. And I asked Mario about that. He said, like, obviously we don't like them, they don't like us, but like we know that like without them, there's no us. Like they make us us because we know that they're striving, they're working to improve. And if they're working to improve and we don't, then we're behind. So we have to keep working to improve.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Things like that, where it's just like, the cultures, even in something like that, where obviously they're enemies and they don't, like each other for the most part, but like still just that level of appreciation, those are things it just doesn't happen here, man. It just doesn't, it's cultural.
Do you think that's one of the big detractors here and why the sport hasn't grown more than it has? Or do you think it's something else?
I just think here folks are very, like combative and competitive, which competition's great on the court, but like ultimately when it comes to futsal, like, I mean, let's talk about the big elephant in the room. Like we're fighting another sport, soccer, for the most part, because people see it as that still. And many futsal folks see it as that. It's like if you start posting and talking about like, we develop players and you're posting like what your futsal kids are doing and they're getting invited to soccer things. And like, are you really growing futsal for futsal? Or are you growing futsal to help players get better at soccer? I'm all for promoting like, people's accomplishments. I'm not saying we should keep things a secret, but like many times folks will, hey, this player got a college soccer scholarship. This player got invited to this and that. It's like, that's a different sport, man. Like, I don't think a basketball club would give props and praises if somebody got invited to a baseball event. Like it's a different sport, I mean, in Portugal it is, in Spain it is, in Argentina it is, in Brazil it is, throughout other parts of Europe it is. And like here it's getting there, but it's just a matter of like what you and I talked before the air. It's like we need to band together with each other and like fight the good fight, and that doesn't mean that we don't like soccer. Like we can like everything, but like ultimately, like until we try to grow futsal for futsal and just put those blinders on, knowing kids are going to choose another sport, no different than, like I said, kids choose different sports all the time, but like, what are futsal people doing? We should be growing futsal, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it seems like too, for me anyway, in my experience, is talking to people in different parts of the country, is that there's a bit of that ego that's tied into that, kind of like you mentioned, and people decide that someone else is out to get them, or that even that other futsal academies are a risk to their future and things. And I've seen some just like really crazy stuff and it's not special to futsal. It's just, I think it's a youth sports thing in the US that goes across all sports. But the putting the health of the club ahead of the future of the kids is something that I think is really hurting the soccer and its niche communities as a whole right now. You see the clubs really competing with each other and undermining each other, and it's like, man, that's not what it's about. Like I don't know. It's disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it where that's kind of just, I think the local culture of just like American youth sports, where I've spent, we've been to Portugal 4 times in the last 2 years. I spent a lot of time there. Not too much throughout other parts, of South America and Europe, but like I go there because of the futsal side, and obviously our daughter's there. I went there and spent a week and a half to move her, and I went back to a couple weeks ago for another week and a half to see her, see how she's doing. And when people ask about like youth sports here, and like I start explaining like the amount of time and logistics and money, like the reaction is universal. It's usually this, like, they literally like, I can't believe it. Like their head goes in their hand, they're like trying to like process like what's going on. Here you guys have this, and there we have that. Like it's not right or wrong. It's just up to your individual interpretation. Obviously, folks here think it's right because it continues. If people here thought it was wrong, then it would be illegal, or it would be vetoed, or it would be outlawed, it would be something, but it's not. So that's not really. I stopped trying to kind of look at that and like fight that, like just know that is what it is. But like, how can we create our little futsal island, whether it be like in Birmingham, and hopefully we can have others, like we have friends in Atlanta and Charlotte and other parts, and find other people that are like us and honestly just want to do what's best for the kid and the game. And then we can kind of, coexist and have our own little ecosystem. And that's in Kansas doing the same. Where we moved in June, but I was kind of back and forth with it because summer's a big time for us here as well. So I was kind of back and forth, and I was patient about kind of what we were going to do there futsal wise. I didn't really want to start kind of like my own program, because it's like, again, I don't want to, there was some existing groups. It's like, I don't want to come in and say, we're going to do futsal, because some people will come just because it's different. Like, can we find a way to work together? Can we find a way to work together? That was our first choice. It didn't happen. So it's like, then we, kind of had to start to kind of do our own thing. So that's kind of where we are there.
What do you think about, that next step that seems to be missing at a critical point with youth where we lose a lot of kids across all sports, and that being high school and a clear pathway to something after youth futsal. I feel like you've kind of tapped into something special, and your daughter's a perfect example of it. Do you mind telling that story and a little bit about how that developed?
Yeah. Yeah, we've actually had three, two of our own kids and one who's our surrogate child, Avery, who's going to Anderlecht next year, whose dad's probably going to have about 100 questions on here. Chris is a good guy. But it's like, again, like when we started 8 years ago, it's not like, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have three kids get professional offers in Europe in 8 years. Like, that's not why we started it. That was never our intention, even up to like, 2 years ago. Like, we never really focused on that. It was just a matter of like, when we started our adult games locally, I wanted that to be something where the young players could aspire to, like, maybe one day I can play for the BHM first team, whether it's semi-pro or pro or, nothing, or just pick up, like whatever it is. It gives them something where we talk about it a lot. Like, all the time in our gym for the last 6 years, we would have futsal games on the wall. For the last 2 years, it was sporting, where it's like, because my thing, I would tell kids and parents, like, we do that because like what you can see is what you can be. Like, if you never see the opportunity and path to become a pro, whatever, violin player or accountant, or you got a nice aquarium back there, aquarium cleaner, whatever it is, like, if you don't see that as an opportunity, then and a possibility, then you have no chance. So like for us, it was a matter of like, how can we, we brought in these guest coaches. They're not from here. They're from everywhere throughout Europe and South America. Like, how can we use those resources and just say, hey, like, if we have players that would like to do more and continue down this futsal path, like, what are the options? And then our oldest son was the first. He spent last September, he spent a month in Finland, preseason with two teams, one Champions League level, another one ended up coming in second place, first division. He had two offers. He ended up coming back. Just, the culture and just that fit wasn't right for him, but that's one. Our daughter's in Portugal now, going to the University of Lisbon and playing at Sporting, which is, again, probably one of the top 3 or 4 futsal clubs in the world. And then we have a young man who he was just accepted to his top choice in Belgium and Brussels, and he's going to be going to Anderlecht and starting out with their U21s next year. So like that's
so awesome.
That's 3 kids in 3 years, man. Like 3 in 3 years in the US where futsal doesn't exist, in Birmingham, which isn't like the futsal metropolis and mecca of the country anyway. Like, if it can be done here, it can be done anywhere. It just takes, just a vision and a commitment, and just understanding that there's going to be days of discomfort where like, why are we doing this? And we've tried to never lose sight of, we're doing this to help the kids and help the game. And that's it. That's the beginning and the end, and a lot of coaches in a lot of different sports will kind of say that. Our parents hopefully know, I know a lot of them do, that have been with us for 6, 7, 8 years. Again, what's one thing I am is like transparent and honest. Like, hey, if I say, hey, we're taking this group of X players to Portugal in March, like, we're taking kids to Portugal in March. If you got to be on a hang glider, we got to be on a hang glider. But like, we're going to address that, and we're going to do our best to stay true to our word. And I think a lot of other, maybe directors and coaches, it's like parents are just used to getting information, and it's like, oh yeah, Johnny said that and it never happened. Like, we're not Johnny. Sorry. If we say we're going to do our best to do this, like we talked about in Birmingham, having our master coach program about, hey, I'm not here for the time being because of, family, we moved, blah, blah, blah. We're going to bring in an international coach, top level, this. And then it took a little longer for visa and things like that. But 6, 8 weeks later, master coach is here, and then another one's coming and another one's coming. We have like 5 or 6 kind of lined up as well. So
that's so cool. Well, and it seems like you guys have tapped into something special in the sense that you don't hear those stories often. I think of here in the Midwest, it pains me to say this being from Ohio, but the Michigan scene is really strong for futsal. And even up there, I really only know of one story of a guy really going against the grain and taking the futsal pathway instead of the soccer pathway, and it earning him that soccer scholarship. His outdoor coaches, as the story goes, losing their minds because he's skipping ECNL tryouts to go do some kind of futsal program instead, and they just couldn't understand it.
Guilty.
Yeah,
Guilty.
right. Exactly. and now he's been an All-American at Michigan State. So it's, it paid off. And there's, you don't get to hear those stories too often because they get overshadowed by the soccer side. But what's
No,
even
and
more
it's hard.
special, yeah,
It's hard, man. Like that's like I just spent 10 days with our daughter, and like so in the last 2 years, like I'm not an overly emotional person, but literally the last 2 years been to Portugal 4 times. I've cried every time.
no
Like
kidding.
the first time I cried was when the guy had us there for training, and I'm sitting in this chair like this, and my laptop's 3 feet away from me, and it's Pani, Ziki, Merlim, Eric Mendonça right in front of me, and I'm like, literally like tears coming down, like what the hell is going on? Like this is like a surreal experience. The next time we went is when we took the 10 kids, and it's like some of the parents were crying, and I was too, because it's like we had a chance to watch the first team train, and we had Ziki playing 1v1 Pana with 6 of our kids. We had a penalty shootout with us against Bernardo Passo, and Nuno Diaz is like asking me like what I think. It's like, dude, like this is like surreal.
Yeah.
The third time we moved our daughter there, so that's another thing. And then this past
That's
time,
a
it's
different
like,
kind of tears.
yeah, this past time, just having a conversation with her where it's like the culture there being very different. Like you get to train when you get to train. Our parents figured out pretty quickly. They were like, hey, are we going to get to train in Jarosha? Ziki Tay don't train in Jarosha, bro. Like the day before Champions League, he trains in Jarosha. Ziki Tay and Pani and Merlim at that time, like those guys aren't training there. They're training in the Deportivo. If you're lucky, you might get to train in there. And a couple of kids did. But for the most part, like
cool.
You're in this school 35 minutes away, and it's 180 years old, and the doors don't close, and it's cold, and rain is coming in the windows. Like you get what you get, And if you don't like it, then you don't get to play at Sporting. You get to play at the neighborhood club. So that's a whole nother conversation, But it's like that there, it was just a matter of like, for her, there's nights when the women's team doesn't train until 10:30 p.m. So they're done at 12:30 a.m.
Wow.
So by the time they shower, they're leaving at 1. And she lives in Odivelas, north of Lisbon. You got to go through Lisbon on the metro an hour and a half. And she's in South Lisbon for school, and it's 8 a.m. class. So you're getting like 5 hours of sleep, man. In a country where a decent amount of people, because we have connections there, and she's friends with girls on the team, and she lives with the coordinator of the women's program, who's the first team coach as well. Like they have a good relationship, but still like 99% of what you hear is a language you don't really understand. So you can never just like settle in and like relax. You're on the metro and people are looking at you because you look different. There's a different language. It's like you can never just like live. So it's like I told her, I was like, like I got emotional where I'm like, hey, like this is hard. I won't use the exact words because I don't want to get canceled on YouTube. But like I said, this stuff is hard, man. Like just know that like we support like what you're doing. And like people talking about here in the US, like they have no idea like how difficult it is, and it's not because she's our daughter, because I told Avery the same thing. Like it's not going to be easy. I said, but the good news is this: if you go back to the US and you want to play soccer at a high level and you want to be a good student there, it ain't going to be easy either. So
that's right.
You can either be somewhere where you enjoy it, where I said you come home for Christmas and it's a break and you decide, hey, I just want to go home for Christmas and I just want to go home. Like, we're not going to think you're soft or you're this or you're that. Like, we love you. Like, what you're doing is amazing, but just know, like, we support you. And she's like, no, like, I want to be here. I was like, okay, like, good for you. I'm like, and I support that too. But like, yeah. So I think that's what it is. It's just that like the unknown of like, we stumbled our way to the opportunity because we had to do it like firsthand. But it's like, if you're a futsal dad in Wyoming and you've got a 15-year-old, 16-year-old son or daughter, like what's the plan? What's the path? Which I think a lot of times these days kids will start playing youth sports, and then not when they're 6 or 7, by the time if they're committed and they're serious at 12 or 13, it's like they're probably doing it to play in college, versus like, I think when we were growing up, we just kind of did it because it was fun. Like I wanted to be a college basketball player, but I never thought, hey, I'm going to do this because this is going to get me to college. It's like I was just going to do that because I wanted to play every day. That's it. That mentality is a little different, where it's like for kids in futsal, like, what's the path? The good news is I have the path, where like I know that first thing you need to do is find the universities. And if you speak the language, it's easier. If you don't, and you only speak English, if we're talking to US people, then you need to find the schools and the universities that offer classes in English and something that your son or daughter might at least remotely be interested in. It might not be their first choice, but maybe it's their second or third. And then you've got to apply to school because you don't get a student visa until the application gets accepted. So everything starts from there. And then the timeline kind of starts working backward from there. So the sooner you can kind of see those things, the better. But like a year and a half ago, I didn't know any of that. Now we had to do it. So now like that's one thing I told, Chris and Avery about, hey, in Belgium, like make sure, because they had some help from the director at Anderlecht, like, hey, here's some things that I saw, like this, like make sure they're looking into that, or you're looking into that. Just be mindful that like these things kind of have to happen in sequence. Otherwise it's going to be, potentially an issue. So.
Wow. Yeah. Not as easy as just hopping on a plane, of course. And,
No.
We do have a question in the Luke put it in the chat since he's kind of behind the scenes today, but you spoke earlier about the culture and how things are in futsaling countries compared to here. What is your view of American futsal? And then he made the comment, it seems that we can't get out of our own way here in the United States. And so he's curious, what's your view of the current state of futsal here in the US?
I think that there's a huge opportunity here. I would say, and that's like even Roger, who's been here, having like never seen futsal in the US, like he came here and he's like, man, like you have good players. And this isn't like him talking about us, because I'm explaining like these groups are good, but when we go play other teams, like other teams are better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of giving him a lay of the land. But it's like the level of player is good, boys and girls up to a certain year, like we've talked about. Then there's that gap. So it's almost like in a vacuum, the 13 and under futsal in the US is the same as or similar to Brazil, Argentina, Spain, blah, 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 blah. As we get beyond that, it gets back to kind of what I mentioned, like why are players still playing? Most players, as they get to be 13 plus, are playing a sport to play in college, but yet we don't have that. We don't have a professional league. We have obviously a couple of semi-professional leagues, but they're regional. So it's like, again, if you're a kid, like we've done some stuff here for adults and we have a pretty consistent, group and following, but like we can't play Grand Rapids, LA. We can't play Lansing because y'all are way up there. You know what I'm saying? Like things like that, where it's like, how can we get that kind of those gap years of like the 14 to 16-year-old? Because once they're to 16, then it's a matter of like, then I think there's real opportunity where if you're a good player at 16, then maybe you've pushed yourself to a point where at least then it comes down to soccer, futsal, 50-50. And then you can choose. If you're still committed and you still have that opportunity and you have that level and that ability, then maybe you do go international. But that's the conversation I had with Ren. Like, I wish there was opportunity here. I don't want to send my daughter 5,000 miles away. Like, it's great for her. It's an amazing chance, like it's good to go visit. I love it. The food's great. The people are great. The pavilion's here. The beach is 20 minutes away. Like, it's fantastic. But like, I don't want to have to worry about like, she's not feeling well the last couple of days. And it's like, I wish I could help you. Sorry. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's the biggest thing, is just having something for players in those gap years, because once the ramp kicks in at 13, 14, other kids do that and our kids do that, which is just because there's nothing for them, or at least they perceive nothing for them, which was kind of our point. Is we had one, we had two, now we have three. We'll take a group in March from Birmingham back to Portugal to Sporting. We'll take a smaller group because we don't have as many. Obviously, we're just starting in Kansas. We'll take a group from Kansas, which we're in the Kansas City area. And my wife is a coach in Pittsburgh, Kansas. No H. You don't put an H on this Pittsburgh. It's different. They don't like that. 21,000 people in the town. And like, I want to take a kid from Pittsburgh, no H, Kansas, in the middle of nowhere, 21,000 people. And like, if he or she's good enough, we take him to Portugal and take him to Lisbon. And that kid's life's different, man, forever.
Cool.
So it's just a matter of, I think, people just committing to that, providing those opportunities for those that want it, because moms and dads and kids want it. I mean, we had 10 go to Portugal last year and 7 received some type of offer of like, hey, can you stay the weekend and play? Hey, can you come to September preseason? I had one coach, actually the gentleman who's coming here in 2 days, he drove from one gym 30 minutes to the gym where we were. And he's like, hey, we want this player, this player, this player. Hey, are they coming? Are they coming? I was like, well, I'm not that player, that player's dad. I'm that player's dad. And he's coming.
Yeah.
I can talk to these players' dad and mom, but like, so like there's definitely opportunity there for sure. It's just a matter of like, other directors and other leaders in organizations, like kind of putting the game and putting players first and like taking it for what it is. Where does every kid need to go international? Absolutely not. But if they don't know that that's an opportunity, then 0% of the kids will go because they don't know it exists.
Right. Do you think that creating futsal at a collegiate level here would make a bigger difference, or having something like a legitimate league when they tried to launch something like the PFL several years ago? Like what do you think would have more impact on that pathway, or maybe get kids more interested in pursuing it the full way?
I would say probably college, because again, I think most college sport is going to be more attainable for more young players than any sport. People have dreams of NBA, WNBA, NFL, MLS, or Premier League, or baseball, the tippy top of the sport. But I think, especially by the time they get to be like 14 or 15, I think a lot of them will be a little bit more realistic about, one, I don't really know if I want to play this forever. Two, I don't really know if I'm good enough. But three, like, I know I want to play for a few more years. So then that would be college, So I think that's something where, I've had conversations with folks like, again, there's like the FCS you mentioned, like it's a regional kind of semi-pro league, but we can create a regional college futsal conference in kind of let's say the Kansas City area. I'm there. Like if we get like, all you need is like, if you have 6 teams, it's better. You play 5 home, 5 away. You play 10 games. You go to a regional tournament. There's your season, and it's a spring season because basketball ends in March and the gyms and arenas sit open in April and May. So it's a spring season because volleyball has it and then basketball has it. Every university is going to have a gym because they'll have volleyball and basketball. So they have the facilities. So it's like, we don't need to fight. You can have it in the spring and you can be the primary sport, and basketball, volleyball can work off season. You can all coexist. So it's a quick 2-month season, but at least that'll get like feet on the ground and that'll kind of get some momentum. Maybe you have like in the West, maybe the Northwest, maybe the, Midwest, Southeast, Northeast, the Texas, Houston area, you have like 6 little pods and there's your 6 champs. And then you go on and we have the, not college football playoff, but the college futsal playoff, where,
Awesome.
for it to happen, like it has to start somewhere. Like I don't think that that's easy, but again, like growing Birmingham futsal program from literally 0 and then a camp of ages, levels, etc., kids, 16 kids, to having 3 kids have professional offers in Europe, like that ain't easy either, man. Like nothing good is ever easy. So it's like,
Right.
if we want the game to move forward, like there has to be opportunity. So I don't see why there couldn't be college futsal. Especially for young ladies, not because I have a daughter, because she's in Portugal, but because of the Title IX side of it. Like that's an easy, you have women's futsal and now you offset the football and all the other male scholarships that you have. And seems to me like a pretty, easy fix for some of those schools.
And then it's again the same way as making it a spring sport. It's a path of least resistance as well. Takes away some variables that would otherwise be a distraction. So
yep, for sure,
it's super important, especially for us when we're trying to just get any foothold we can in a lot of ways. It's interesting because around me, the college scene is kind of been in the spotlight, I guess I would say, with some of the like local coaches and things in the area, and people are starting to realize like, hey, and actually IX in our last interview talked about how he pursued futsal at an intramural level even through college when he came here from Malawi, and that's kind of what the conversation that's being had is we've got these cultural melting pots at every university in the planet, and especially in the US, and there's people who know what futsal is there. It's not like our everyday life where we kind of got to explain what we do sometimes. Yep. And maybe that's an easy place to find the people that could then in turn in the next however many years it takes build that next step, which is the adult level. So, yeah, it's interesting. I found out that one of my local universities, Cleveland State University, actually has a club. It's not a university sanctioned team, but a
Right.
university sanctioned club, and they do get funding
Yeah.
from the university, which I thought was really interesting. I'd not run into that yet before, but I mean,
No, that's the
they had a
first
nice
I
little
heard.
budget and access to the 18 passenger vans, and they got enough guys to do 2 full teams. And like, we just need a league somewhere.
Who do they
Kind of
play?
well, that's part of the problem they found is that no one's really reciprocating. There's futsal clubs at places like the University of Akron, which is a soccer hotbed in
Yeah,
Northeast Ohio for collegiate,
sure.
and Kent State right next door makes a ton of sense. And nobody's really responding back. But we knew a couple of the right people were like, we could probably. It wouldn't be perfect. It'd be a league, it'd be like a beer league kind of style thing, but we could give them a place to play. And they said, yeah, we were shocked. We even reached out to places like Ohio State that have similar programs to ours. And, even though they're within the state, it's a couple hours, kind of similar to Alabama in the sense that, the North and the South are pretty far away, just because it's the same two
Yeah.
letters in the address doesn't mean
Yeah.
that it's close.
No.
And they're like, yeah, well, they weren't willing to drive the 2 hours or even meet us in the middle. It was too far for them. And it's like, what do you do with that program then? There's really nothing to
Yeah.
do
That's
except play local.
everybody wants to play games. Like that's the thing, even like for our kids that like we try to find games, we try to get as many games as we can, but like still there's the, well, this team's kids are available, but the other team isn't because they have a soccer tournament, or we have a soccer tournament. So like trying to find, those, it's like playing Jenga, and for whatever
Yeah.
reason, it always seems to fall when we get near game time. So that's like in the winter league for here, we're able to provide as many games as we can. That's our deal. We try to get all the young players here at least 2 either like team games or like pool games, like 2 play opportunities per weekend. Now if they're not available, they're not available, but like we're trying to do that as much as we can because we know whether it's young kids or old kids, everybody wants to play. So trying to find a way to do that would be amazing for sure.
Definitely. 2 comments in the chat I wanted to point out. Luke said that college sports being so big, I mean, and he points out, you even see celebrities like Post Malone at these big football games and other sports events, especially with them. One thing I kind of give the college scene a ton of credit for in sports in general is they're finding a way to make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and make the scene and the spectacle a little bit bigger. And you now see volleyball games inside of football arenas. You see hockey matches in Ann Arbor and in the big house, and stuff like this that even the shine of American football is starting to shine lights on other people and give them opportunities, which is cool. But the second, kind of on the flip side of that college scene, the second comment from Ron Leedy in the chat, we're beginning to see junior colleges on the West Coast have an intramural program for futsal, which is really cool.
Amazing.
That's interesting. I didn't know that was happening out there, Ron. That's really cool.
Good. Yeah.
Hopefully we could see more of that in places like Auburn and Alabama and Pittsburgh.
That's sure. No, and that's having just come back from Portugal and spent, I was there 10 days and saw 24 different futsal things. Everything from like 8-year-old training up to like literally Sporting Anderlecht Champions League, Sporting Braga Champions League. Like in that environment, that's the college football environment. That's Michigan, Ohio State. That's Alabama, Auburn. That's, I'll stop there because I don't want to offend anybody else. Oh, you mentioned that. Like those are the 2 big ones. Sorry. But like being in that environment, like that's what it is, where if we had something like that, it would be a pretty, I think, quick transition into, just say the schools that you mentioned, where if Alabama and Auburn play each other in men's or women's futsal, like people the first time may not know what the hell it is. But if there's like some type of like community education, like they're going to show up just because you're playing the enemy, and they're going to get behind it, whether it's, that level of university or junior college or whatever. I mean, it's something, and again, Ja Rocha holds 8,500 people. You don't need 8,500 people. You can have 800 to 1,000 people and have an amazing environment, and culture in the arena for sure. It can be like a cauldron for the other team to walk into. So that's definitely good to hear, though, that there's groups that are doing it, whether it's intramurals or otherwise. It's got to start somewhere for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Because I know I was a little bummed out. It seemed like, you know, uh, when things happened at the national level with Dushan, it seemed like we lost a lot of momentum across the board. The some other fallout from that is like Westcliff no longer pursuing futsal, and that was such a promising thing. And I know I think there was a small NAI college in Orlando, I want to say, somewhere in Florida.
Yeah.
It was also
Yeah.
kind of going down that path as well.
Yeah, I
And
think Barry maybe.
Barry, was
Maybe
that who
that's
it was?
incorrect, but I think because I know Dushan had done a camp down there, and yeah, he was definitely the trying to be the forefather of that, and put a footprint down to kind of.
Yeah,
I mean, his vested interest is one to grow the game because he's going to be on the sidelines coaching in the World Cup, and he doesn't want to play Argentina with non-futsal players, which I
right.
get. I can remember coaches like at an event I was at, like questioning him about why he wanted to do this. I was like, hey man, like you want to play against Argentina and have them shoot at your goal 73 times and you've got non-futsal players? Like he can do what he wants to do.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, he's out there taking grenades against the best in the world. Like, let's give him a vehicle and chance to be able to grow the game and develop players that can feed the national team program, just like everybody else in the world does. Otherwise, we're not even going to be second place. We're going to be down the list, again and again, unfortunately.
absolutely. What do you think about where things kind of stand with the national program and what's going on at a national level in the U.S.? Do you think that, because I know there's always two ways of thinking, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. I like to think we need to build it up from the bottom and prove that they need to support us because there needs to be a justification. But on the other hand, there's obviously no support really at the top, or if there is, it seems like they're uncertain what to do in
Yeah.
a lot of decisions to me. I'm just curious what your take is on where everything stands and what's next. What would be the next big move?
I would say it probably needs to like bottom up, top down, and like meet in the middle. So
Yeah,
like if we can have however we would define success, and this would be like a blanket statement for the men's team and the women's team. I know it's different because the men is a little more established than the women's is just forming, et cetera. But still, like whoever the crop of women's national team players and men's national team players are, can we put a good core group of players together that can play well, and whether that's women when they have qualification and can they qualify for the first ever World Cup? Awesome. Or can they at least play well? If they don't qualify, they don't qualify. Same thing for the men. Like, can they play well? Like, can they give young players something to aspire to? And then local directors have something where we have academies, thousands of academies throughout the US, but it's like, do we have something where we can show young players like, hey, this is what you can be if we work on these things and we grow and develop and develop and develop? When you might not have futsal players in those pods, it's like, well, why do I need to play futsal to play futsal? And they don't play futsal. Like, so I think that again, I know you've hashed that on several, videos. It's like,
yeah, yep.
in no other sport does that happen now. USA basketball only has basketball players. USA baseball only has baseball players. US soccer, they're not bringing beach people in. They're not bringing futsal people in. Like, why are we bringing in, good players? But again, like if you take a really good player from another sport, like, and they play a really good player from the same sport, they're probably not going to fare as well. They're just not initially, and it'll take some time. But the problem is, like, at that level, at the national team level, at the highest level, you don't have time. Like everything is results, and it's either qualification or not, like, or advance or not. So there's not really a whole lot of margin for error there, And again, maybe that's the best we can do right now. Again, I don't know. I don't work at the federation. I mean, I'm close personal friends with Sasha, who's a futsal guy. I know Diego Barato well. He's a futsal guy. I think we need to have, which it seems like we do, we need to have kind of futsal people in place, and they can make, I would think that if we have futsal people in place, I tend to see, like, for sometimes, much to my own chagrin, I kind of try to see like the best in those people and like expect them to do well. Both of them are very good guys. Tafa on the women's side, very nice lady. Obviously Sasha helps there, so I think the staff are good people, and having futsal people there can push the game. But then again, we get kind of to the gap of like, what's feeding that? Like an 11-year-old can't play in the national team. So what do they do? And like what's underneath the 22-year-olds kind of feeding that, you know. That's I think the biggest frustration for myself, and I know yourself and others. It's like, well, how are we ever gonna grow if we don't have like a sustainable foundation to kind of build a national program upon, you know?
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think too, I think of other sports, and it just seems like, and maybe it's because I spend so much time watching soccer and futsal, so that's why I feel this way. I see more of the good and more of the bad, but I don't see other sports quite as dysfunctional as we are on decision making, or kind of stumbling through drama and just little things, like not even just futsal, but soccer too.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I just don't know. Well, I guess it's something to ask you, because your experience was outside of other sports before you came to futsal. I mean, do you feel the same way, or do you think it's just because our eyes are set on, we got our blinders on soccer right now, and so we see the good and the bad, and not really with the other sports as much?
It's definitely different, where that's conversations that I've had with, like, from a soccer basketball side, like just it's not one's better, one's worse. It's not, oh, this guy doesn't like soccer. It has nothing to do with it. It's a matter of just, I think, like in terms of like player identification, if you would line up 100 basketball coaches, there would be a general consensus of like what a good basketball player would be. Now, obviously, some might be more skilled, less skilled. If you need a power forward, they've got to like, but what a good player is, I think, is a more consistent answer. Definitely than soccer in our country. And like for futsal, it's like, do we even like have that? You know what I'm saying? Like, do we have like what the DNA and like fabric of a good futsal player would be? I mean, I know at Birmingham we do, because like when coaches come in, or when we brought a group to Portugal last year and we're going again, it's like I kind of have boxes that need to be checked, and it's like these are on the list and these are not. Like, here's why you're not. Not like we don't like you, but like these abilities are just something that you don't have yet. Doesn't mean you won't have it. Like we have one player who I tell this story a lot. Young player, started about 2 years ago in the program with a summer camp. So it's like winter and summer is kind of an entry point for a lot of kids, where it's like, hey, we'll go to summer camp, and like he fell in love with the game. His first ever day in the Birmingham Futsal program was probably the worst possible experience anybody could ever imagine. Like awful.
Oh no.
Terrible. Like as bad as bad as bad. I won't go into more details. Bad. A year and a half later, he's at Portugal and they want him to come back for a month in preseason.
Wow.
Like,
oh wow.
Years. Like that's why I cry. Where it's like, again, like do we have people in charge of other programs that are like willing to invest and take time to pour into young players, to encourage them to do whatever you want to do? Again, like if you can see it, you can be it. Know that. Like Zicky Tay was 11-year-old Zicky too, and he was icky. He wasn't Zicky yet. He was icky Tay. He wasn't Zick. Now he's Zick. It's different, but he had people believe in him. Now also he had, he was at Sporting then, and it's like they're grooming, for the first team. So it's like they have that, which we don't have that, but again, I think it's just different of like, what is a good futsal player? And then how many folks like even really care about being a good futsal player, because we may be just developing them to get better at soccer, like I mentioned at the beginning, versus like we want to develop good futsal players. If you choose to go to soccer, like I'm not slandering, but like honestly, that's easy. Like we know that's a development tool. It's like you play baseball, you swing a weighted bat, you take the weight off, the bat's faster. Like you play futsal, it speeds up your feet, it makes you two-footed, you see the game faster, you start to recognize situations differently. Like that's the easy part. Like we want to develop for this. We know we can hit that, so.
Well, and it seems like as well that there's so many other programs that are pulling from futsal, and you talked about not necessarily having real futsalers in the roster at all times with the national team as well. And Luke had a question he wanted to ask you on that. And speaking of those non-futsal players, do you have a view on MASL and the American indoor soccer scene?
It's a
Loaded
different
question.
sport. It's a different sport, you know. Like, I mean, we it wasn't NMASL. That there was a smaller local team. Maybe it was the NISL. I can't remember. I think the league folded, but there was a team in Birmingham. They actually trained in our gym and trained futsal for the preseason, and we went to watch it. Like, it was fun. It was fun to watch. But again, like, it's a different sport, you know. So it's like, I think the U.S. is big enough. I think there's enough resource, financially, time, people, manpower, all of the above, operations and systems, where we could promote that sport, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of the futsal sport.
Right.
Like, why can we not promote both? You know?
Nice.
I mean, that would be, you know, that would be my first question. And it's like, if, again, then if we're affiliated with the arena side, then why are we so passionate about this? And if we are passionate, then why are we not promoting both? Like, why is there no opportunity, you know, where it's MASL, again, like, it's fun to watch. It's fine. I have no issue with MASL, zero. My issue is, like, why is there nothing for futsal? Because I'm a futsal person. See?
Right.
Futsal person.
That's
like,
right. Yes.
Yeah, that's, you know, and it can be, well, I wasn't always a futsal person, but like, that's what I have become. Just like I'm the sporting guy. I go to a tournament, like, oh yeah, you're the sporting guy. Well, I'm the sporting guy. Like, we always post sporting stuff because, again, I met this dude and he, like, took us in, and it was, like, amazing. I wasn't always a sporting fan. I'll tell you the story. 2 years ago, we go to sporting. That I gave the events of what happened. Later that day, we go to the other club that wears red, which, by the way, I have no red clothes. I threw them all away, like, literally. I threw away a Lululemon.
That's awesome.
I threw away a Lululemon $70 red shirt. Boom. And my wife was like, "You're crazy. I can't deal with you." I'm like, "Sorry, man. It's red." She knows better. No red. So we were there, and they were like, the first team's coming in and train. You can't take pictures. You can't take videos. You can't do this. You can't do that. I was like, bro, like, that didn't seem like a whole lot of fun. Meanwhile, it's sport, and they're like, yeah, take a picture, video. Like, we have no secrets. I was like, I like these guys better, man.
That's awesome.
Like, so that's why, like, they were so welcoming, and that's why we share a lot of the content and post, you know, like, when they win or a game, and we put, like, what time it is in there and how you can stream it. We have probably dozens of people in Birmingham, you know, in our program that are watching consistently, like, Sporting Club de Portugal futsal games that 2-3 years ago that didn't happen, you know, and that's a way to grow the game.
Yeah.
You know? But I know this, if the folks at Sporting see us sharing 19 different clubs on social media, then we're not going to have the same relationship. Now, that's not why we do it, but we have authenticity about, like, they appreciated us and they showed us respect. Like, we appreciate them and show them respect. You know, that doesn't mean that I don't like other teams, but, like, they've been pretty good to us, you know, pretty good.
It's amazing too. You know, an organization as big as Sporting, and, you know, considering their involvement in all the sports, you know, that kind of European model of so much that they're involved in, really.
Everything. It's crazy.
And to still find a way to be that personable with you is amazing. I think that's a contagious story. That makes me want to be a Sporting fan, and I wasn't even a part of it, you know.
I understand. And but honestly, like, that's why I'm so, like, grateful to them. And I tell them every time, like, I was just there, and Champions League host, the last 4 training sessions, like, there was one non-sporting player, staff, or coach on the court, and that was me. Like, I was the only one let in.
Wow.
And that's not like me bragging, because I'll give you the side story. Mario asked Nuno, the head coach, like, in Portuguese, I know enough to kind of know what he was asking. Hey, like, basically, like, is it okay for him to come to training? And, like, Nuno Dias, the manager, like, I won't say exactly what he said, but I heard it. Like, he had almost like a disgusted look on his face. Like, why are you asking me that? Like, you know, he can come to whatever he wants, which is what they told us last year. Like, when we were there, we had we brought our kids to Sporting for the week of spring, like we talked about. And I had, like, the boys coordinator say, like, hey, do you need anything? I'm like, when I'm here, I'm good. That's always my answer. When I'm here, I'm good, man. I don't need anything. Like, I'm good. I'm really good. This is amazing. Thank you. And he's like, no, like, because, like, Nuno said, like, whatever you want, you get. I was like, well, you're amazing and Nuno's amazing. Like, but, like, again, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm good right now. You know,
it's humbling, isn't it?
It's
wild.
Like, I cried. I honestly did, because it's like here, like what we're talking about, like we're here fighting with each other about this futsal and that futsal and arena soccer. And it's all scraps falling from soccer. And there it's like the best in the world, like have respect for whether it's me or him, like just for people. Because that's what Paolo, the top assistant who does a lot of, the tactics and kind of the on the court coaching and kind of, because Nuno's the boss. So he's involved in the game. And Paolo's kind of behind the scenes, like, hey, sub this, do this, do this. He spent 30 minutes after their last training session before Champions League, like with me, like on the board, like, hey, this is what we're looking to do tactically. This is why we had this activity. We're going to look to do this, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, and I told him the next day, I was like, I thanked him then. I told him the next day again, I was like, I just want to thank you again. Like, like you don't have to spend time. Like this is an important time for you guys. I understand. And he's like, no, and he told me, he's like, you're a part of the team. He's like with you, like you can make us better and we can make you better. And we understand like that we need each other,
Holy cow.
People here ain't saying that, man. People here are arguing about like which tournament we should go to, or we should be in this like league or this and that. It's like, none of that stuff matters, man. What matters is the game and the players. That's all that matters. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what Luke said to him, you just nailed it. And it, USA were bickering over scraps instead of, getting to that next level. But a comment before that from Kat Nichols, no red to the point. I don't wear red, which is one of my school colors when it's sporting game days. That's awesome.
That's my wife. So
I've even
brainwashed her. The Pittsburgh colors are red and yellow. And she told her head coach gave her like a shirt to give to me. And she's like, he's not going to wear that. Like, what do you mean? He doesn't like Pitt? She goes, no, he loves Pitt, but it's red. He ain't wearing red. So he got me a black one. It was good. We met in the middle.
That's good. Yeah, we can live with that. Yeah. That's so fun. I think too that it just adds that layer to it, that makes it special and exciting. And you mentioned that Champions League experience, and you got to see them face RSCA. You got to see them face Braga. What was that? What was that like? Tell me all about it.
I mean, it was like the first game. The games were Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. The Tuesday game was Anderlecht, which obviously the joke is like on all the sporting comments when they post it, it's like it's in Portuguese, but it's like always Anderlecht, because they play them like every year.
It seems that way, doesn't it? It's like crazy. You could almost count on it.
Yeah. So like I knew it was going to be a good game. But the interesting part was, so Ja Rocha's here, and literally right across the street is Avalade, the outdoor stadium soccer. So Champions League futsal, 5:30 p.m., 17:30 Portuguese time, Sporting Anderlecht. 20 p.m., 8 p.m., Sporting Arsenal, UEFA Football Champions League.
Oh.
So like the atmosphere was amazing, crazy. Where, I mean, the ultra fans were amazing. Game was back and forth, fun, fast-paced game. The second game against Pilsen, not as good a team, not as good a crowd. But then the third game, the capacity was probably about the same, but the ultras were like on another level because it was Braga, and Braga ultras arrive a little bit late, and Sporting ultras decide that they're going to start chanting things and saying certain words and using certain hand gestures to the Braga fans back and forth, which I videoed to a few people, which was interesting. And like flares go off, they have fireworks, like, so the ultra level was probably even more against Braga. One, because it was the game to advance, and two, it's it's a rival. But like I was sending videos. I mean, I need a whole nother terabyte of storage probably for all the stuff I have. But like literally that game for 40 minutes nonstop, like the crowd did not stop chanting and singing the whole time.
Wow.
Like for 3 days, I had Sporting Ale in my head, like on repeat. Like for 3 days, it was in there. It's still in there. But like for 3 days, like it was in my head. I could just hear it and hear it and hear it. Like again, the atmosphere of that it's American college football. I mean, I'm from New Orleans, so I'm an LSU fan. So like Tiger Stadium, like what that is, like it's the same, man. Culturally, it's the same. Those people are just, our folks are passionate about these sports, they're passionate about these sports. I tell Kat, my wife, that I think when the organization of youth soccer in the 80s started to grow, it was because of an influx of a lot of like British coaches that came over and brought soccer. If those would have been Brazilian futsal coaches, I think the landscape would be different. Because you can't tell me that a 6 to 10-year-old that has a chance to play one or the other is going to not choose futsal because of how much faster it is and more engaging, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
They just will, maybe not all. It's like, I understand that people like soccer. I get it. But like out of 10, I think it's going to be, maybe 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 are going to pick futsal just because it's faster. And they get the ball more, they get to shoot more. It's just more engaging, but here we are.
Yeah. I like you referencing LSU versus, an experience like that. And then Luke mentioned as well that that experience was similar to how he became a Portland Timbers fan out in the Pacific Northwest. And, I want to ask you because I like the difference, and I think that they're two very unique fan experiences and are special in different ways. But a big game in a big crowd like an LSU setting versus something a little more intimate, but I would argue almost a more passionate crowd in a lot of ways in the soccer or futsal scene because we're nuts. And so I was just curious, like what of those experiences, what was the difference and what really stood out to you?
I would say probably, and I've been to several games at Tiger Stadium. It's been a while, but like that's where I grew up. So that was like, that's still home. I'm still crazy like that, and a Saints fan. So I'm crying now because we started out well, and then when our whole team got hurt. But again, I digress.
Yeah.
But that's another reason why I like Lisbon, because it reminds me a lot of like New Orleans. Like culturally, they're very similar. Like if people here watching, listening, or later, if you've been to New Orleans, it's like you're not in the US anymore, because you're not. Like you're in like a little like French colony, an older French colony, which is kind of the way, obviously Lisbon's Portuguese, but it's still European. I would say just culturally, they remind me of each other. And then the passion of the people in that futsal environment, for the first and the third game, I mean, there's 8,000 compared to like 100,000. So like, it was pretty even. It definitely wasn't 12-1 football, outdid it. So I would probably say, like, to your point, the intimate setting of that, where like you can just feel like it's alive, like Ja Rocha is alive, which is what they say, like it is like it. And that's like the players recognize that, like at the end, like, they show respect, and they show, the gratitude for what the fans bring. And there's a real connection, at least in that club, with the fans, like they're one and the same for sure.
Yeah, I think about, so for me, my version of that would be going to an Ohio State Michigan game in in the Horseshoe in Columbus, and that experience, with 110,000 people is extreme. But then going to a step down from that in a more intimate setting of being with 25,000 people in Columbus watching USA versus Mexico in Crew Stadium, that almost eclipsed my experience of that USA or of that OSU Michigan match, just because it was so much louder in a tighter space, and it's a different kind of passion, especially when it's a national team. And then I think too of my experience when we had a local semi-pro team in Akron. And I decided this is what triggered everything that eventually led to this channel, was doing that supporters group for that team. And I've never felt more a part of something with those, 20 people that it ended up being for 3 games before COVID dashed my dreams. But that to me was one of the best sports experiences, with just 20 other guys in that section that turned out to be as crazy as me, but to be in an arena that had 600-700 people in it, 800 people in it per game, that was more memorable, shockingly. And you could talk about I just think of like the parallels to the European scene, where you can be in a place, and I think England is probably most famous for it, where you could be in Manchester and cheer for one of those big 2 clubs, or you could go watch a league club, a non-league club, and have a completely different insane soccer experience, football experience, for completely different reasons. It's just really, really interesting. I think it creates some familiarity to futsal that people are looking for outside of the big corporate sporting events we tend to see.
Yep. And I would say that the passion of like, again, the passion of what I saw at the Champions League games, because we've been to other games too, and it was similar, is probably closer to like college, because for the most part, like college fans are going to be more like regionally based.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't live in Louisiana now, but I was like born there. Whereas like Cowboys fans are everywhere. Like,
Right.
your 49er fans are everywhere. Like, you're not from San Francisco only. Like, sporting ultras behind the goal, like there's one, he's going to love the shout out and props here. It's like, it's actually a neighborhood where my daughter lives. It's the Odie Velish supporters. Like, they've got a sign. It looks like death metal, like graffiti. And it's like Odie Velish supporters. And it's like two guys, one main guy and another guy. And like, they hold that banner, and these folks hold that banner. And the brigade, they come in, and there's a young lady with a big bass drum and a freaking big drumstick. There's a dude in his 60s with a mustache and glasses, looks like Mario and Luigi, like swinging the flag, like, and they were there every game. It's like those people are connected to the club, and they're from Lisbon. They're Lisboan. It's not like here you're a 49er fan and you're from New York, which is fine. It's a free country. You can do what you want, but the connection is just so different,
Yeah, entirely different. Well, it's funny. Ix and Luke kind of talked about this is so much of, and other sports are different because they've been around for longer, but even MLS, like there's not a grassroots story to most of those MLS clubs, with maybe there's exceptions, of course, but I think of Columbus Crew, and the backstory is, a multimillionaire decided he wanted a club, and Columbus was born. Like, there's not a cool story about it. There's not kids that a priest at a local church wanted them off the street and playing someplace safer and put them in the courtyard. Like, you don't get that story like you get in Argentina and in Europe and all these other places with these humble beginnings that turn into mega clubs.
Yeah, well, it's franchises. It's like a McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a business.
It's very corporate.
A soccer business, or a basketball business, or a football business. It's just different.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about what's next for Birmingham? What do you guys see as, like, what you talked about how you're always looking forward today and the next day? What's next for you guys? How do you top what you've already done?
I would just say topping it is just, again, like continuing to deliver what we see as like an authentic futsal experience, like that. Again, that's all we can do. Whether it be with this yesterday, Monday, we had 24 little ballers. And my buddy, who I've referenced before, Coach G, Guillermo Uribe, his format is like a Genesis style program. So basically you integrate the parent and the kid. So like it was me and Roger, master coach, like kind of laying out, this is what we're going to do. Moms and dads, like you always want to know, like, what should you do when you go home? This, like, whatever you see today, like, these are things that can be done when you go home. So whether it's that authentic experience of like just integrating the parent and the player and the ball together, all the way to in March when we take another group, to sporting, and everything in between. That's our goal, is to keep, I'm not here on the ground, even though I am now, but like, we don't live here. But can I maintain connection? Can we use our resources? Can we leverage our resources, whether it be locally or abroad, obviously, as we're doing now, to continue to deliver, an authentic experience? And that's the goal. Should be for everybody.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you guys are all about. And as you know, I've mentioned before, I'm a big fan of what you guys do. And I think that what you guys do is pure. It's actually for the development of the game and the growth of our youth and the program and the sport as a whole, which I absolutely love that that's a part of your guys' DNA.
Thank you. So it's cool. Not easy. It's definitely not easy, for sure. It's a fight. It's the futsal crusade every day.
That's right.
And that's not like, and I don't actively seek that. It's just a matter of, like, again, knowing the other entities that are going to kind of creep in, and every local youth sports culture is different. Birmingham is different than Kansas, is different than Akron, is different than California, et cetera, et cetera. But like, kind of knowing the things that have kind of gone on here, and kind of what's been said, and kind of what's been leveraged, and what's been promised to players about, like, honestly, we had several directors of another sport tell kids if they played futsal with us, that they wouldn't make certain soccer teams. So
Man.
then it's like the players in the crosshairs and the parents are like, well, like in order for us to play in college, we've got to make this team and play at this league. So like we can't play anymore. Like, well, do you want to play? Well, yeah, but like, what are we doing then? Like, why are we fighting and telling kids they can or can't do? Like, we tell our kids all the time, like, you want to play soccer, play soccer. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't miss every futsal practice and just go to soccer and think you're going to be a good futsal player. Like, it doesn't work like that, you know? Like, that's again, I was the good and bad is I'm a coach's son. I tell all our parents. The good and bad is I started the program because I was one of you. I was a soccer dad. I had 3 kids, like I said. So I know what you're going through, but I also know that we never miss practice. And some of that is like I was the one running the practice, but like we were training from 4:30 to 6:30 on Friday. We had the car loaded up. We got in the car. We drove to Atlanta. We had games at 8 a.m. the next morning. Like I've been there and done it, man. Like it's not easy, you know. But like I told our daughter in Portugal, like it's if you want to do something great and special and you want to be the best, like it ain't going to be easy. Like you have to do more. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're gonna if you do the same thing everybody else is doing, you're gonna be just like everybody else. And that's to me, that's always been boring. You know, I've never wanted to be like everybody else. I'm kind of, as people know, I'm kind of my own dude, man. Like, which is probably why I enjoy futsal because we're a little different.
That's right.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I remember talking to I did an interview with a guy, a YouTuber that goes by Ransom Bance, and he was he did YouTube as a job. He had actually he's made it pretty big. He's up to 110,000 subs now, but he had bought a English club and kind of revived it, rebranded it, did all this work, and the amount of resistance that he saw because he had a different way of thinking was shocking. And you know,
From whom?
from their organization, actually their league organization, and he was trying to bring ideas to them that they were ignoring, or at least he felt that way. And then on top of that, just kind of getting fines here and there, just like poking the bear kind of stuff over little things and really nitpicking him. And there's two sides to every story. You read into what you're getting into, and you got to understand that you can't blatantly ignore rules or standards. But
Sure.
at the same time, it felt like kind of a raw deal. And so it was interesting because I feel like we see that a lot, even in our own sport, let alone when soccer gets involved, where there's that cannibalism a lot of times, and this fear of the unknown when someone brings something new and fresh. Luke can, if he was in the voice chat with us, could attest to even just getting streaming started in a lot of ways. The amount of resistance we've seen in the last couple of years, even in a modern
Yeah.
technology era like we're in right now, was so hard. But we're getting there. Like we're finally starting to find
Yeah. That's
places where
good.
we can develop and grow. And like you said, fighting the good fight, and being persistent. We're not going to, and this kind of goes full circle to how I feel about owning our backyards and proving that we deserve the support. And that is, we have to be persistent. If we sit and wait for it, it'll never happen. And I,
Yep.
I think that's really important to remember is sitting at home and saying, woe is me is not going to get the job done. But
No. I think
Luke
it's
has,
human nature
oh,
where like I think most people are kind of in the, especially like for the most part, like executives, directors, leaders, like most people are like in the no business. No, this is the way we do it. Or like, no, we have to do it this way versus like I had a couple of parents asking me, they had some ideas about doing sponsorship. I'm like, just so you know, like I'm in the yes business, like 99.9 with a little hat. I'm old math, repeating percent of my answers
yes.
will
Yeah.
always be yes. Like, you know, except for like this one thing, like I'll never agree. I'll tell you, like having a logo on the front of the jersey, like we're never playing for that. We're playing for this. Like that's who we're playing for. We can have a
Yeah.
logo on the sleeve. We can have it like on the back of the kid's head. I don't care. But like, on the shorts, whatever, but like never there. So, but I said outside of that, like virtually everything else that's legal, I will agree to and say, do it. Like if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if we keep doing the same thing that we're doing, we're going to keep getting the same result, man. And it's like, again,
Yeah.
if we want to be better, then we have to strive to be different and find ways where we can continue to push forward, which our families know. I know some are on here, like they can attest to that. Like we're always, tweaking, not changing, but like, hey, we did it this way. This will stay the same, but this will change. This will change. This will change, and we try to keep going forward and navigating as best we can.
That's the key. You evolve, you keep evolving, do it in a positive way, but don't keep that doesn't mean you have to reinvent every time either, which is important. And when you guys have such a stable foundation as it seems you do, I mean, why would you? Why would you risk that? You know, but making those little tweaks that'll continue to build the house, as Dushan would say if he was here.
That's
You know, that's the
he
stuff
would
that's
say that.
important.
He would definitely say that. I miss him. He's a
Yeah.
good guy. He's amazing for sure.
I met him for the first time a few months ago, and it was eye opening. I mean, even just in the short period of time I got to spend with him, I was just
Oh, at the
enamored.
FCS event? Is that where you met him?
Yeah, yeah, met him at the AGM
Yeah.
event when we did that, and
Yeah.
when Jeremy told me that we had secured his trip, I was like, oh man, I cannot wait. Like, does he
Yeah.
need picked up from the airport? Like, what does he need? Like, no,
Yeah, I met him. It was at I think it was maybe USYF or something. Yeah, because I was there for an event and they announced like that he was going to be there the final day and he was going to do a clinic. And it's like, Arim was a youth player at that time and we had a flight to go to, I think to Dallas or somewhere. So we were going to miss it. And I immediately like, we're canceling the flight. Like we're moving. And they're like, how much did that cost? I was like, $300. It's like, I'm going to learn from the national team coach for 3 or 4 hours. Like that's worth $300. Like, you know,
yeah,
it was a free clinic. Now it wasn't for us because we had to adjust our flight, but still like, and from that, like we had the opportunity to meet. I met Otto, who was there helping as well. You know, and I was like on the court, like taking notes and pictures and videos and trying to dissect everything that I could. That was July. And then in February, you know, whatever, 5, 6 months later, 6, 7 months later, he was in Birmingham. He was here. He and Pablo da Silva came for 4 days to spend time and work with the players.
It's so cool. Yeah, he was so selfless to that too, you know, as far as doing those kinds of things. I thought that was always really impressive how he found a way to make that work and really gave himself to the sport. I mean,
yep.
It's commendable.
Sure. Yep. He's an amazing person for sure.
Luke's got a question. Where do you see futsal in the next 5 years in America, and then again in 10? Like, how do you see our sport as a whole, not just Birmingham, evolving in this country?
I mean, I think it'll be different. You know, it kind of depends on. I mean, I know the big rocks and big pieces that people are talked about with like if futsal in the Olympics happens, ... then. You know, if a league happens, ... So I think, you know, where it is in 5 or 10 years kind of depends on those pieces. You know, again, I think more older kids will be playing then, whether they're seeing opportunities like we and others have provided to continue and to go abroad. So I think that's just a little more common than it was, you know, years ago. Like when I went to college, again, I'm old, like I can't remember anybody going abroad. Like that just wasn't even like, you know, like conceived. That wasn't a thing. Now that's a little more common in terms of like exchange students, not even for futsal, but just in general. I think. So I think whether it's that, more younger players will play. Obviously, if there's a big, you know, checkmate piece like a league or like futsal in the Olympics, then there's a direct line and like a more urgent reason of needing to play and needing to have players. You know, if it's in the Olympics, then we have to have futsal players, you know, and it's going to be, I think, a little bit harder. Or if we have a league, then whether it's men's or women's, obviously men's would probably be first because there's already been some, you know, some groundswell there over the years. If there's 8 teams of 14 players, or maybe that's a roster and you have 18, that's, you know, that's 140 players. So right now, I don't know if we have 140, you know, relatively professional futsal players in the country. So they'll have to come from somewhere.
Right.
You know, so I think that's kind of I don't want to say that like we hope it happens because we've always been hoping for those things, you know. People are like, yeah, I was hoping for that in 2000. I'm like, well, I wasn't a futsal coach then, so sorry. But sorry. You know, but if that's what it takes for there to be a major impact in the US culture, then that's what it takes, you know. If we can do things to expedite that process, then good. You know, but until then, if it means one Birmingham kid every 2 years goes international, fine. And it's like the hardest thing to do is to be the first at anything. You know, like people are kind of generally scared of that and kind of shy away. It's like, well, I don't want to be the first because what if I'd rather be second and learn. It's like, I'll go through the door and catch the bullets, man. Like I'll catch them all.
Who's going to kick
like
that door down?
We started the program here. Like there was one club that had like a futsal winter league. They called it futsal. They didn't call it futsal. So it is what it is. But there was no training, like there was no like teaching, there was no game. It was just like, again, something for kids to do for fun, like for 6 weeks, which is good. And then since we started, then there's been like other like offshoots, like trying to kind of start, programs, which is fine, but it's like the game's been around since 1930 in Uruguay. It's not like it's new, it's 95 years old, man. Like, why are people now just hearing about it? So
Yeah, that's the wild thing about it, is there's still that, to use a business term, that consumer education that's going on in a lot of ways. And it's interesting. Do you think that, do you think there's anything that we can do? You mentioned those things, those pivotal moments that could possibly drive it forward. Is there anything that you would encourage people watching the stream to do that would help the growth of futsal that you think is most important?
I would say probably, again, it depends on like who I'm speaking to right now and with. But anybody, watch more games. Like, we talk to our players about that all the time. And I would challenge, this is a challenge, take it or leave it if you're hearing this. Like, if you're a futsal coach or academy director or leader, ask players who their favorite player is. I would shudder to think how many would even name a futsal player. They'll say Messi, Ronaldo, Mbappe, blah, 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 versus like Ziki, Merlin, Pani, I named all Portuguese guys. Imagine that. Tito, Ferral, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, that's something where like, I take pride in like our group in Birmingham. Like, not all will do that, but some will know. Some will be like futsal player, futsal player, futsal player, soccer, futsal player, soccer, futsal player, futsal player. Like, that's a major culture shift when they just start thinking that, So watch more games where they become educated around like what the game actually is. It's not YouTube 3-minute highlights of nutmeg this and pana and, the tricks. Like, that's a part of it. No different than any other sport. That's like my basketball background. That's the N1 mixtape, the guy who could cross over off his knees. Like, he did that, but like, that's not authentic, to the game. And then play more. If you watch more and you play more, and then that's the way that I think anybody who's listening to this you don't need to go to Portugal to immerse yourself in the culture. We live in the technology age, like you mentioned. Like, somebody's going to probably watch this on YouTube, type in blah, 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 futsal game live, and you can watch 1,000. You can, if you like Portuguese futsal like I do, you can get the Channel 11 app for free, and you can watch every live men's and women's first division game, and they have them on demand. You can watch every game for the last 2 years.
That's awesome.
So it's like these days, like, you have to not want to watch the game to not watch the game,
Right.
That's something I challenge our players about all the time. Like we'll send links out, and I used to do it because I'm kind of mean. I used to do it where I would screen record it and put it to our YouTube channel. Then I could see the views. And I was like, who watched the game? And hands would go up. I was like, y'all lying, bro.
That's right.
I was like, there's only 2 views. I watched it and she watched it. There wasn't 17 people viewing it. Oh, yeah. And I didn't even mean to do that. I just like stumbled upon that because I looked and I was like, there's only 2 views. And then I just asked one day and it was like all these hands went up. I was like, no, I don't know. And then all of a sudden the views started going. And then we would have questions about what'd you think about the game and who scored, and like to give them a little quiz, but then they know there's accountability there, And I wasn't trying to be mean. It's just like, again, you say you want to get better at the game. Like, you have to be able to see the game. You have to know what the game is. How do you know if you're good if you've never watched it?
Right.
I mean, that's any game. That's anything. How do you know if you're a good piano player if you've never heard or you've never practiced? Like, because it makes noise? Well, yeah. That doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
that's a perfect analogy. I love that. Yeah, I think that's so important too, is watching the game and supporting the game. And it's funny, it's come up a couple times now in our last couple streams, but in today's world, it's easy to find content. It's easy to find things to watch.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you have to have a certain cable channel anymore to be able to watch something. So there's less and less excuses for it. Yeah. The only thing that drives me nuts, and we talked about it offline before we got started, sometimes you'll need a VPN, but but it's doable. So it's getting more and more available, which is exciting. And for anyone that's interested, selfless plug here, but we do have a Discord channel for our younger audience will know what that is, but they that we do post links as we find them. If Luke and I or anybody else stumbles across a link and wants to share it of games that they find online, there's a place for that so that we can all watch together and kind of keep conversations about games and goals we see going. So if you guys are interested in something like that or need a resource that can get you more links, then join us there, which is cool. We've been watching a lot of. We went through a little Thai league phase there for a while, and I think lately it's been it's the Argentina playoffs right now, so we've been watching that, and then a little bit of the Italian league as well. So tons of available quality leagues out there that you can find for free on YouTube, which is exciting. And like you said, with the right apps, still free. Just gotta get that download in, and that you could get some really high quality, some of the best futsal in the world out of places like the Portuguese league, which is really, really important.
Yep. And that's even something with like we do it in our camps in the summer in Birmingham, and I started doing it in Kansas, where we'll have like a positional focus. So like say it's a this long session, maybe 20 minutes is pivot work. Then I would send them like female pivot, male pivot, because so much of it's going to be, male, male, male. It's like, well, a young lady, like, can we show them what a female looks like doing that skill too, or just doing some skills, where we try to do that as much as we can, is just sending out almost like the gateway kind of entry level, where like it's going to be highlights, it's going to be that, but that's going to get their attention. And then we kind of talk about the moments of like, did you see when player A scored that goal, but before they scored the goal, notice how they received the ball, notice how they were in this position, notice how they were, moving this way against the defender. So just trying to promote, education and using all those tools and resources, like you said.
Yeah, they're there. Just got to use them. Got to find them and use them.
For sure. They are there.
Well, Tristan, I really appreciate all the time you spent with us tonight, and for our audience as well. And thank you, everyone out there that tuned in today. Awesome crowd tonight. And we will continue this conversation. I think that Birmingham is going to be a big part of the conversation moving forward. The things you guys are doing and thinking outside of the box and how to grow the sport, which is awesome. And I really appreciate you sharing that story with us, and hopefully not only motivating some youth, but maybe motivating some other academy owners to take a similar path and get creative, which I think is important. So
futsal for futsal.
That's
what
right.
It's all about, man. Futsal for futsal.
Exactly.
It's literally that simple.
Is there any socials you want to plug or anything like that before we close things down for the night? Or
Birmingham Futsal, we actually have that one, the group, and I get DMs all the time from people that think it's Birmingham, England, because we were first, I guess. So Birmingham Futsal, and then our Kansas, it's obviously not in Birmingham, so that's Temsola. So like TEM_SOLA, that's Portuguese for got soul, which has always been like our little, like I know you say that at the end.
That's right. It's coming.
Your videos. But we've had that, like on the back of this shirt, like we have it on signs, like got soul. So that's how you would say that in Portuguese, is Temsola.
Yep. I love it.
Temsola Futsal with the underscores. That's our Kansas group.
That's really cool. So I will, guys, if you're watching live now, I don't have the links to Temsola in the description yet, but we do have Birmingham's socials posted there. And I hope you don't mind, Tristan, but I put your personal Twitter in there too, because I think if people are interested in seeing some of your trips to see your daughter and seeing what sporting is up to, another great place to find some really cool videos and pictures of game day, which I thought was awesome. So
I'm open to helping anyone and everyone that wants to learn and do something in the game. That's why we're here.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. I really appreciate it. And as you let in, for everybody at home, and until we see you guys on the next stream, don't forget to play with your soul.